Andrew said to his brother Simon, "We have found the Messiah." Today is St. Andrew's Day and a day of prayer for the missionary work of the church. A day of prayer for the missionary work of the church because Andrew is rightly regarded as the first evangelist among the early disciples of Jesus. In the first chapter of the Gospel of John, we read that Andrew's first instinct after he himself followed Jesus was to find his brother Simon and to say to him, "We have found the Messiah." His testimony leads Simon to Jesus, and Jesus looks then at Simon and says, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be known as Cephas," which is translated Petros, the rock. We owe that encounter to Andrew. So there are three parts to this presidential address. I want to say something first of all about the general election, then something about the appointment processes which are currently in train for senior staff posts in the diocese, and then for most of the time I want to talk about what our senior staff has for the last couple of months been calling, for shorthand, our promised land. And in that connection there is an exercise in which I want to engage all of you. Those of you around tables will find post-it notes and pens available. Those in chairs, we've tried to make sure that the same is true for you too. It's kind of less obvious how you'll lay your hands on them, but Debs has, I think, made post-it notes and pens available at the back too. We have a full hour for both of the headings listed on your agenda at item 10, an hour and 10 minutes if we need it. And I'm just going to speak for 10 or at the most 15 minutes. And then I'll introduce the exercise, which will take about half an hour. That'll still leave a full half hour for you to interrogate the paper that I circulated in advance of this morning, which I've called a briefing paper for reimagining Ministry for Mission 2020 to 2025. I hope that will seem like a good use of the next hour. And on the way, I expect to refer once or twice or three times to St. Andrew. First of all, then, the general election. I want to appeal to you as members of the Synod and through you to the congregations of the diocese, to church schools and chaplaincies to pray and to vote and to speak up. In your praying, I hope you won't only pray about the outcome of the election, important as that is. It is vital to pray for the will of God to be done, of course, and for the Lord to provide us with the sort of government and leadership which will conform most closely to the standards of his kingdom. But I want to encourage you to pray in at least two other ways as well. First, I want to encourage you to pray in penitence and lament for our recent history, which has led our nation to a point of such inequality and division. In the last 5 or 10 years, we have allowed great swathes of our nation, not least in this diocese, to feel neglected and unrepresented, disconnected and disenfranchised in our politics. And we've lost certain values which we could once take for granted, like respect for those with whom we disagree, respect for truthfulness and for integrity. It's a sad turn of affairs, and we should be lamenting it in our prayers. And thirdly, in addition, would you please pray for the protection of politicians, local and national, and for the protection of candidates in the election? One of the other things we should lament is the terrible and widespread experience among elected politicians of receiving death threats. It's one of the evils of a digital age, which appears to give some people a sense that they can strike out anonymously to hurt and frighten others. Please pray, God have mercy and deliver us. Secondly, please vote. This is the democratic responsibility of every Christian, it seems to me. You can be sure that those who hold extreme views will vote. If those of us who long to see a return to a kinder, gentler and more generous politics don't use our vote, we're simply conceding the battle. Please don't spoil your ballot paper. Read the manifestos. Remember, this is not a proxy referendum on Brexit. Remember that every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. Remember that it is always the most vulnerable in society whose needs are most easily forgotten. Remember that we are facing an unprecedented climate emergency. And then vote with your conscience for a government which offers you most hope that the cause of God's coming kingdom will be advanced. But thirdly, please speak up. If you attend hustings, or if canvassers come to your door, when you are at the school gate or at the pub bar, at home or at work, please make it clear that to you, truth matters. Facts matter. The future is dark for us if truth has no currency in politics, if claims can be bandied about which have no relationship to reality and over which there's no accountability, so that politicians can say one thing 1 minute and the opposite the next without any recognition that a position has moved. Please make it clear that to you, integrity, respect and generosity matter. Together we need to find a way to challenge bullying behaviour and the abuse of power, things which have no place in a civilised society. The future is dark for all of us if there are no shared values, not just on which our politics is based, but on which our society is based. And if those of us who are followers of Jesus are not praying with urgency and voting with conscience and speaking up and out with courage, who will do it? And even if we're not alone, and as a matter of fact, I don't think we are quite alone, why would the followers of Jesus Christ, who himself prayed with urgency and challenged political leaders with courage, especially when he saw an abuse of power, why would we do any less? That's the first thing I want to say. And on this St. Andrew's Day, can you imagine the tone of the debate of a second independence referendum for Scotland, whose patron St. Andrew is, if we are not first able to restore decency to politics? Secondly, then, and on a lighter note, an update with regard to the 3 appointment processes which are in train at present for posts on the bishop's senior staff. In each role, I am looking for people with the missionary instincts of a St. Andrew who introduced not just his brother to Jesus in John 1, but some Greeks to Jesus in John chapter 12. First, we await the announcement of the appointment of a new Bishop of Doncaster. As you will be well aware, in the Constitution of the Church of England, the approval of the sovereign is required for episcopal appointments following a nomination by the Prime Minister. And as you can imagine, 10 Downing Street has been a busy place in the last 6 weeks, so moving the process forward has not been the Prime Minister's number 1 priority. But I'm pleased to say that my own experience of this whole process has been encouraging. I'm really grateful to the advisory panel, to the Reverend Amanda Barraclough, Dr. Sue Gentle, Mrs. Pam Liversidge and the Reverend Canon Ian Smith, who joined with me in mid-October to meet the candidates we had invited for interview. I'm also grateful to the candidates who took the costly step of making themselves vulnerable in engaging in this discernment process with us. And thank you to those of you who took it upon yourself to be surrounding that process with your prayers. They were answered. I believe the Lord has blessed us with an inspired and inspiring appointment, and I dare say it will not be too much longer before an appointment is announced. We are entirely dependent on York Minster, however, for the date of the new bishop's consecration, and unfortunately for us, the next available date happens to be as late as it can be in the Epiphany term. It will take place on March the 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation, and I hope as many of you as possible will be there in support at 11 a.m. Just 3 days later, on the 28th of March, Saturday at 4 p.m, there will be a service of installation and welcome in Sheffield Cathedral, and again, I hope you might make it a priority to be present. I have already invited the Bishop Designate to preach at the Chrism Eucharist on the Monday of Holy Week, and at the Beacon service for Thy Kingdom Come on the afternoon of the Feast of Pentecost at Rotherham Minster. And I think I have managed to say all that without giving you any clues whatsoever as to the identity or even the gender of the person concerned. Secondly, for your information, I have circulated draft versions of the papers relating to the appointment of the next Archdeacon of Doncaster. The Synod has no formal involvement in that process, but I wanted you to be aware of the progress. The post is now advertised as of yesterday, with a lightly revised version of the papers circulated to you before. Details are available on our website with a closing date of the 6th of January, the Feast of the Epiphany. If you know of suitable candidates, please encourage them to consider an application. If you believe you are a suitable candidate, please apply. Meanwhile, I think you are all aware that I have invited the Reverend Canon David Stevens to take on a role as the acting Archdeacon of Doncaster from the 1st of January. I'm immensely grateful to him. Thirdly, the post of Chief Executive to the Diocesan Board of Finance and Diocesan Secretary is also now advertised. In this case, the closing date is the 2nd of January, and again, the job description and person specification are on our website. There is a genuine occupational requirement for this role to be held by a practicing Christian. So again, if you know of suitable applicants, please encourage them to consider their application. And if you believe yourself to be a suitable candidate, please apply. Meanwhile, Synod might like to know that an interim diocesan secretary has been recruited, paid for entirely by the Church Commissioners, to support us 2 days a week until a new chief exec can take up the post. The interim person, and as far as I'm aware, it's a sheer coincidence that I'm telling you this on St. Andrew's Day, is called Andrew Brooks. He's a former diocesan secretary in the Diocese of London. He now works in a variety of consultancy roles within the Church of England and beyond it, and indeed has done stints as an interim diocesan secretary in several other places. As it happens, although he lives in London, he is a worksop lad and knows this region well. In the interests of full disclosure, I should inform Synod that Andy is my oldest and closest friend. He was my best man when Cathy and I married in 1984, and I was his a couple of years later, and I'm godfather to his oldest son. I was entirely open about this friendship with the Church Commissioners when I asked them to fund this interim appointment. Fortunately, they know Andrew well and regard him highly, use him often as a consultant, and have agreed with me that in this situation it will be a benefit if he and I already know and trust one another. He begins work next week, so as to have a couple of days of handover with Heidi, and he'll remain in post until, as I say, the new chief exec is able to take up the responsibility, probably around Easter, which is also roughly when I expect the new Archdeacon of Doncaster to be in post.